very G4 TV. That sounded like early 2000s. I fucking love it.
Yeah,
Right?
watching
Anyway,
Attack of the Show.
what's up, everybody, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Not a Robot Screens, the podcast where we discuss your favorite forms of entertainment that you, the viewers, enjoy on a screen. I am your host, Isaiah Zapata, and with me, as always, Josh Murray.
Howdy, howdy, howdy.
Today, we have a rather special episode for you, you beautiful legends out there in the world, as we have a guest on the show today who wants to take a lovely journey into the dark abyss and discuss comics and graphic novels that will send shivers down your spine once again. He's an avid lover of comics and one of our other co-hosts on the NAR network. Welcome, Brandon Chandler.
Hey, Isaiah, good to be back.
How you doing, bud?
I'm doing very well. Excited to finally get a chance to do this again. The last time we sat down and chatted about horror comics, it was a lot of fun, and I don't know if I've been pestering you about it, but I've probably been pestering Josh about it. Like, when are we gonna do the second episode of horror comics? Because it was just so much fun the last time. And I've been longing for another one.
That's
I
great.
missed it. I was seriously jealous.
You should be, because we had a lengthy conversation about our favorite things, some things that we would like to see, some things that we haven't seen yet. It was a great time, and you just, you dropped the ball and just didn't show up. You're kind of fired.
Yeah.
I hope you know that.
I'm a
Yeah.
horrible person.
I guess just to recap you, Josh. So some of the things that we talked about last time was, obviously, we were talking about the comics and graphic novels in general. That's kind of Brandon's bread and butter. That's his thing. That's what he's great at. But some of the ones that we
Stop
discussed
it.
The comics librarian, my man.
Right.
I'm blushing.
But we talked about some of the oldies and goldies and some of the greats and some of the newcomers and within the last, I would say, 10, 15 years. So we had like witches. We had
Oh
something.
God, yes.
Something is killing the children.
Beautiful.
We talked about Black Hole, Gideon Falls.
Now I haven't read Black Hole.
That one was interesting. I know. I personally read that. At the time, Brandon did not. So I don't know if he has thus far.
I still have not, but another one that you had mentioned that I did finally get a chance to read, and I haven't finished it, but I finally picked up the first trade, was Ice Cream Man, because he gave me one hell of a pitch on that one. And I didn't really know a lot about it. It was a creative team that was sort of unfamiliar to me, which is always kind of a nice treat, because there's no expectations going in. It's just sort of, let's see what's here and let's see what it's about. And Isaiah had given me the synopsis of the first issue. I was definitely hooked, so I went and found the first trade, and it was pretty much all that he had promised it to be and more. So I'll be excited to try and catch up with the rest of the series when I can. But really haunting, very chilling, which I think is par for the course for a horror comic.
Yeah, I completely forgot about Ice Cream Man, dude. I had read that. Entirely. I had read that probably 4 or 5 issues, and then I don't know what the hell happened. I just forgot about it. I haven't picked it back up yet. So I'm making a note to add that back to my list like right now.
Yeah, I mean, I read a couple of its trades, and they were very creative. From the jump that this Ice Cream Man he's not right. He would, if he were in a movie, they would definitely have some Dutch angle going on, making this guy look really odd. And he is very odd. He's just like giving out ice cream and stuff, and I don't think he even charges anything from it. And then you have this weird kid who just like, I love my spider. This spider is awesome. And it's like, kid, like,
Stop it.
Yeah.
right, like, we need to find you some help. And then it just leads into some more intense moments that are like, what the fuck is going on? And for that's why I recommended it, and I would put that on maybe on my top 10 list. I don't want to say it's a top 5 pick, but if you were just picking up like horror comics or even just graphic novels in general.
We'll be right back.
Well, all right then.
Right. if you if you were just getting into this, I would say that's a good starting point. But as you were saying, Josh, you said you hadn't heard about Black Hole. Black Hole is definitely something you pick up as an adult. It's not something that I think you should have children read. It's about teenage angst and STDs that basically remind you of the Scarlet Letter that you may have read in high school way back when. But it also turns you into like a mutant, which
Oh boy.
also kind of calls back to that Scarlet Letter reference where you're kind of alienated because you are different now, and it really puts a strain on some relationships with the teens who are going through these moments, and it's interesting. People, it's really more of an emotional trip, but seeing how these people's lives get changed because of these mutations really just kind of puts you in a weird state of mind.
Well, that's definitely something I'll have to again. It's been on the to read list for a while, but that's really one that I'll have to get to now that I hear more of that stuff and it's like right up my alley. And now I'm just getting more and more anxious to actually read it. I feel like I've heard of like because I looked up more about it and the creator of the book, Charles Burns. I feel like I've heard of stuff from him, but I don't know him exceptionally well. But yeah, no, that's definitely one that I have to get to sooner rather than later.
And the biggest one that we discussed was definitely the one that we thought was the scariest of them all, which I would say I put that on the top 5. That being Gideon Falls.
Yes, yeah. Oh my God.
Oh man, Gideon Falls. Wow.
I have some connections to that series, and I don't know. It's been so long since we did that episode. That's why I was kind of sad about it, because it feels like so much has happened since then. But also, I feel like I remember a lot of the stuff that we talked about, but I feel like I've forgotten the finer details. So I don't know what I had the chance to recommend there. So I'm just gonna kind of go out on a limb and recommend some stuff that I may have talked about on the last episode. I just don't remember. But
That's
a couple
fine.
of them have
recap and recant, man. I wasn't there, so I get to hear it all brand new, and everybody else does too. So that's fantastic.
Well, all right then. But yeah, a couple of them have some connections, both spiritual and literal, to Gideon Falls, which I think will be very satisfying, or unsatisfying, considering it is horror. Unsatisfying in the sense that it's gonna make you feel terrible and uncomfortable, and you won't sleep. But satisfying in that it's a really compelling read.
Well, I mean, unless that's what you're after, and then that will be quite satisfying.
Yeah, exactly.
Devil's advocate. I've been playing with my kids all day, man. Sorry for the sarcasm. As far as like uber modern, not before we get into like hardcore meat and potatoes, like over the last few years and sporadically throughout comics, there's been books that just kind of like touch on the horror themes. Some that I feel were released recently and did not get the attention that they deserved. Some that Brandon thinks are despicable.
Interesting.
And a couple that I'm curious of what you guys think of. So DC presents The Conjuring. I thought that was a pretty decent comic book run. I think that it like captured the feeling of the Conjuring movies, which I wasn't exactly a huge fan of, but I think the comics did the Conjuring better than the movies. Again, not a fan of the Conjuring, and I know that's not exactly a popular opinion. All of the
is it unpopular? I don't know. I remember the only one I've seen was The Conjuring 2, because I went with friends, and I just remember it was kind of corny, and then I think I fell asleep. and then I don't really remember much. Oh, and I think it was set in London, and that's all I really remember about that movie. So I don't know if they're all that popular among general audience as well.
I want you guys to know I'm getting sick and tired of all this Conjuring slander that you have.
Oh man.
It's not that bad. I promise you, it's not that bad.
I mean, it's not the worst, but I'm not a huge fan of it. But if Isaiah, if you haven't had a chance to go check out DC Presents The Conjuring, and the subtitle is The Lover, and then every issue has a different backup story in the back of it, dude. It's a real good read. All of Joe Hill Presents, Basket Full of Heads, Refrigerator Full of Heads, Lolo Woods, Dollhouse. There were other ones, and I don't remember all the creative teams that were behind this underneath the Joe Hill Presents imprint, but those were all fantastic. Nice House on the Lake. That shit is some top tier, unbelievable stuff. Did you guys talk about Nice House on the Lake during the last one?
I don't know if we did.
I don't.
And I don't. I think I left that one off, just because I wasn't entirely sure if I wanted to call that horror. I guess in a sense it does have horrific elements. Don't get me wrong, but I guess we'll get into it a little bit later. But my definition of horror comics, even sometimes when they fall under the horror label on like Amazon or whatever respective publishing company they're under, labels them as horror. I sometimes, I guess I'm so particular about it and what I'm looking for now that I feel like I've refined my taste. I guess to continue what Isaiah and I were talking about, because I remember when we were first talking, I'd mentioned that I'm not really a big fan of horror. I feel like now it's changed, but I think especially when I kind of started, I was definitely not a big fan of horror. I was like, scary. I don't want to spend money on this if it's just gonna make me feel like crap. But I don't know. Maybe it was just the state of the world in 2020 or whatever. But for some reason, I just got really into horror comics. I had a friend who sent me a copy of Joe Hill's. Why am I blanking on the name right now? Oh my god.
The Black Phone.
No. Oh my god. Oh, this is so terrible.
Oh, Lock and Key?
It's been a long day. Lock and Key, yes. Yeah, Lock and Key.
Okay.
Yeah,
That is
I
one of my
forgot that.
favorite.
Yes.
Volume
yeah,
4. Joe Hill.
yeah.
One of
And
the
it
best
was-
volumes of Lock and Key, man.
Yeah, and it was like that. And I think around that time, I'd started reading Gideon Falls. It was just like a very strange moment where all of a sudden I was reading a ton of horror books, and for some reason something flipped, and I just found myself really attracted to it. So then I felt like I didn't have quite as much of a refined taste, but now I can be pretentious about it, and be like, okay, I know what I want in my horror. So anyway, to get back to Nice House on the Lake, yeah, I think I don't know if we had mentioned it, but I think maybe one of the reasons, I don't know, memory is, it's been so long since we did that last episode, but
It's like steeped in. I would almost
Yeah.
call it science fiction horror mystery almost.
yeah, I was thinking, I guess I thought of it more as like, yeah, sci-fi mystery with horrific elements, but I didn't know if I would, at least for me, because my standards are all whack, but I didn't know if I would call that one a straight up horror. But it is a very good read, don't get me wrong, there's no dispute there. And
All right, Isaiah, what does it take for a comic book to qualify as a horror comic book to you?
Well, I would say the same thing for like a film as well. I think because it's all really just one thing, just adapted in a different way. So obviously you
Right.
got to have your stark introduction. There has to be something in the beginning that really grabs your attention, and you could say that for any novel, any show, any book, any movie. But horror, someone needs to die. And I firmly believe that someone needs to die, and it has to be in a gruesome, shocking way that's going to pull you in. And obviously, if you already got that, we already can assume it's either going to be a drama, thriller, horror. but I think there needs to be a level of mystery. It has to be creative in terms of like its art style. And we can go and you can look at any horror comic, graphic novel, even just like the writing in just like a novel itself. Like if you look at Gideon Falls, it's so different than anything you're gonna see. Even if you're looking at Victor Lavelle's Destroyer, or you're reading The Drifting Classroom, or even getting into like more like traditional comics like Arkham Asylum, A Serious House on Serious Earth.
Yeah, Jesus Christ, man! I mean, talk about a fucking book.
They're all very, very different and creative, and they take their own little, whoever is the writer and like the artist, they're taking their own little piece of them and throwing into there.
Whoa, 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 whoa! I'm sorry, but I've got to step in here. Arkham Asylum, A Serious House on Serious Earth is not whoever wrote that. That is Grant Morrison.
I think he was
Dave
talking
McKean,
generally.
Man.
Yeah, I think he's talking generally, not specifically about that. Yeah.
Don't step on my.
Yeah.
That's my idol. Dave McKean. Yeah. Uh-oh.
Whoa. Oh my God, there's two.
Yeah.
Are we in a horror film?
Isaiah
Isaiah
is stuck in a body snatcher loop.
Yeah.
every time Josh
Isaiah is coming from A24.
don't put that on the universe.
Yeah.
But like, they all have something. There's always a piece of the writer and the author that's in it that makes it unique to them. And like that's obviously something that you could say about anything once again. But for it to really be horror, I think there has to be a problem that's significantly larger than just what one person can solve. And even though we see something like this in like Something is Killing the Children, you have basically one person who is really attuned to these creatures that are killing the children. It's a bigger problem than just them they can solve. Same thing with Gideon Falls.
Yeah.
With the cat-eyed boy. Same thing with after
Cat-eyed
like
boy. Did you read that shit?
A little bit of it. It grew my attention, and then life was like, "Hey, you got other things to do," and I'm like, "You sure?
Yeah.
Are you positive?"
Cat-eyed boy was a little bit out there for me, but by your definition, Isaiah, it sounds like you would definitely consider Nice House on the Lake a horror. I do too. It is like they're on the borderline where it's like, is a psychological thriller or a horror? But Nice House on the Lake, it's written really well, and that for me to say that about James Tynion is a lot, because I picked him apart when he was writing Capes. James Tynion excels in this book, and then who's the artist here, Brandon?
Alvaro Martinez, who was his partner on Detective Comics, which is my second favorite run on Detective Comics, and he's he's just a genius. Like I think what made Nice House on the Lake really connect with people is, and this is getting into the like nerdy art stuff, so forgive me, but when he was on Detective and also Justice League Dark, he was paired with an inker, Raul Fernandez, who would usually kind of clean his stuff up, make it look very smooth, so it was, all polished and nice for the superhero stuff. But Alvaro started inking his own stuff, and I think it gave it an almost more like of a paint-like quality. And I know this because I follow him on Instagram, as I do with all the artists that I love. And he posts a lot of his process stuff, and basically just breaks down what they look like without the colors when they're raw. And it's just wonderfully impressive. But I think what it really does for the Nice House on the Lake, and maybe what works in the more horrific moments, is that it gives it a kind of like a dreamlike quality. So there are moments, especially with the supernatural character Walter, where when applied with the colors from Jordi Belair, who I think is using a natural process. She's not like painting it or anything, but mixed with Alvaro's pencils and his sort of more paint-like inks, gives it like a dreamlike quality, which really works, especially in the scenes with Walter, where it's just like you see that and you're like, oh my god, let me get the fuck out of here, right? Let me get out of here, man.
It makes the crazy way it makes certain shit stand right up off the page is just fucking mind blowing.
Yeah, I mean, there's the cliffhanger in the first issue where I'm forgetting the character's name, but she has her hand blown off by Walter, and it's just this like horribly graphic panel. But the way that Jordi and Alvaro work together is it looks almost like muddy, so it's not just like spewing blood, and it looks like like a kind of cheap grindhouse movie or something. It just has like this like really visceral, etchy quality to it that makes it all the more horrific. I guess maybe it is a horror book. I don't know. But yeah, no, I think art-wise, they're really just pulling out their A game, and I think it stands apart from a lot of the stuff that he's done in the past on the capes side. I'll use the word you used of DC. So very cool stuff.
All right, what do you guys think about I know what Brandon thinks about the Deceased series. But there's the Deceased series, there's DC versus Vampires.
Before we get into
Arkham
that,
City, Order of the World.
Yeah, before we get into that, there is one thing that I kind of wanted to talk about, because I thought Isaiah was making a really great point about how horror is in a lot of ways personal. It should, either reveal something about the creator or speak to something that the creator believes in. And I think that's why Something is Killing the Children, and another series that shares a lot of tropes, also written by James Tynion, The Department of Truth, has connected with people, because part of what the series taps into is the, and I'm going to try and find the right words for it, but sort of the horrors that we create for ourselves, and it tackles it on two fronts. Something is Killing the Children, obviously, I would say is more focused on like the youth perspective, where children are creating these monsters for themselves that are often manifestations of other personal problems. And the Department of Truth handles that, but from the conspiracy side, which is, I would say, a lot more adult-oriented. Crazy people who are aged 20 to 70, believing in, nonsensical stuff like QAnon and Pizzagate and every other thing. But I think what James has done really well is tapped into that and shown how personal it is to a lot of different people, while also showing how he himself is connected to it personally, because obviously he's done a lot of research on whether it's conspiracy theories or the manifestation of child horror or whatever, but has just done a really great job of sharing that aspect of both adulthood and the youth perspective, and making it incredibly personal, making it something that I think a lot of people can relate to and empathize with. So I think that's why it's impossible to say why a series has become a hit. You can list a number of reasons, but ultimately predicting a hit is like winning the lottery. It's just random. But I think maybe in part that's why the series has connected with a lot of people. It's got something that a lot of people can understand and relate to, both young and old. Sorry for all the old people out there. I wouldn't make you feel aged. But I think it's a good way to kind of... Yeah, but no, I wasn't talking to you. Just anyone who is
Isaiah makes fun of my age all the time. Don't worry about it.
But yeah, I think both those series have done a really great job of connecting to a wide range of demographics, and doing it in a way that is personal and speaks to a lot of the fears that people have right now. So yeah, that's my little thesis.
I do want to point out that Martin Simmons does a fantastic job with the Department series. These covers are insane. They are great. Yeah. I mean, some of them, it's not a whole lot of different than what some of the original it might be, like specifically for like volume 1. But if you're looking at like some of the other volumes, or even some of the singles, they have some crazy imagery. Like issue 21 per se, just has like this weird like angular shaped Nosferatu uh, bird thing just staring at you with the pentagram, and I'm just like, I need this to stop. this is this.
Yeah, no, Martin Simmons is great. It's like, I mean, I know he had done a couple of, I think he did a horror series with Joe Hill. It's called like Dying is Easy or something, but I haven't read that.
Oh, I've
But
missed that.
yeah, Martin Simmons is like, he just sort of stepped out of nowhere, and it feels like he stepped out of like, 1993, 1994 Vertigo with like that really painted photorealistic style of like a Dave McKean, or like when I was about to say Roland Bashi, but it's not. It's man, I'm just off my game today. But it's
Stashpet kind of does the same.
yeah. Oh, sorry. No, I was thinking of Duncan Fegredo, who used to kind of paint his stuff in a similar style that made it look like very photorealistic and dreamlike. I'm sure if you just look up like old Vertigo covers, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Where it feels like Martin Simmons stepped out of that era and is just here now and is producing work that is of the same, if not better quality than a lot of stuff from that era. So yeah, no, he's absolutely great and makes the series better.
Perfect.
You couldn't set it better. Um, but Josh, what were you asking again? We wanted our opinion on something.
Oh, just I was gonna ask. There's different kinds of comics that follow more of like an action or a different kind of trope mystery, but definitely are rooted in the dark, like DC versus Vampires or Marvel Zombies. The entire Deceased series, The Umbrella Academy, Heroes, Arkham City, Order of the World. That was an amazing story. It was very dark. It was very deep. It was very psychological. I don't know if it was horror. What do you think, Brandon? I know you're familiar with the majority of those.
Yeah, I guess it kind of depends, and this is probably where my pretentious definition gets in, and I won't linger on this too long because I want to hear Isaiah's response as well. Like we're presenting a case in front of the jury. But for me at least, I feel like some of those definitely fall under horror. But there are multiple, as I'm sure Isaiah knows, there are multiple different types of horror. There are ones that are more grounded or psychological or don't necessarily involve a lot of action. It's more personal. It doesn't involve a lot of kind of manic action, I guess is the word I could use. So for something like DC versus Vampires or DCs, which obviously use elements of the supernatural, and I would definitely call them horror titles. I'd see it kind of like in the same vein of like I don't know, an Army of Darkness or something like that, where
Okay,
it's
so
very
like
entertaining.
campy horror.
Yeah, it can't be horror. More action oriented. Like you'll get your scares, you'll get your spooks, but it's definitely more on like the spectacle of the thing rather than really trying to unpack something psychologically, which is not a bad thing. I mean, a lot of those are fun.
No, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah,
Like
but I
Deceased
think
is an emotional story, but it's not psychologically
no, yeah, and I think some of the
intriguing.
ones, yeah, I think some of the ones that we'll get into probably fall more into that category where it's like, okay, we're really just trying to unpack someone's mind or a group of people's mind or watching them fall apart. It's like watching, I don't know, like yeah, I guess Army of Darkness or what's another like kind of schlocky horror movie. Something like in that vein versus
Ash
like
versus the Evil Dead.
yeah, Ash versus the Evil Dead, or it's like comparing that to like The Witch or any number of kind of more slower personal horror films. But Isaiah, I'm interested in hearing your rebuttal in the question of action versus personal.
you know, I think there's levels to horror for sure. I think and like you said, like you have your high art kind of horror where you have like any you have the Lighthouse, which Josh can attest to. He doesn't hate it, but it's still like a higher art whether you like it or not, there is like it's very abstract. But then you have like The
Yeah,
Witch.
high art, abstract, psychological thriller, maybe.
Mhm.
That's usually how these like higher end horrors go. They really want to you to think and toy with your mind and really like, is this really happening? Did that really occur? You know, you really want to delve deep into your characters' minds, and that's what you see in some of these higher arts. But then you got your higher ends, but not like at the top shelf. Um, you know, it's usually like a lot of shocking material. Like you got like a little bit of guttural, but there's still like a heavy plot presence there. You got your middle lines where it's like we don't really care as much about the plot. It's basically like really your standard slasher. You know, your
Yeah.
Your Michael, your Jasons. Like we know where it's going. We're here to see the kills. And then you have, and I don't want to say low tier because they're still great in their own right, but the less emphasis on the horror itself, but more for the enjoyment of what's going on, more stressful and not as much anxiety as some of the other levels have it, but like they get you like what is happening, what's going to happen next, like the anticipation. And it's like you guys said, like some of these DC horror, and I would classify them as horror. They're just not as
Horror based, just like horror elements.
I would
like
say
I mentioned-
psychological.
Yeah, like but like as I mentioned,
Yeah.
like Arkham Asylum, A Serious House on Serious Earth. We can all
Oh yeah,
say that.
definitely.
A great issue, and that takes you know, like the psyche and pushes it to a higher level. And I would say
Oh yeah, it
that
does.
more of a traditional horror than Marvel Zombies. That just kind of like
Yeah, I think you can definitely get different tiers in your superhero fare. And if we're on the topic of Grant Morrison, I think there are a lot of different. There are ones that you could compare that are literally on opposite ends of the spectrum. So you could have. It's funny to
Nameless.
think about it this way. Well, that was one I was going to mention later, but I was thinking specifically Batman. So you could take three different Grant Morrison Batman titles, and I'm thinking Arkham Asylum, A Serious House on Serious Earth, Batman Gothic, and I was going to put the Black Glove. And all
Okay.
three of those I think would fall along the spectrum that we talked about. So if you're looking for the more psychological, quote unquote, highbrow, Arkham Asylum is probably going to be something that you're looking for, very dreamlike. It's very philosophical. Something that's more in the middle, I would say, is Gothic, where it kind of rides the line between the psychological stuff, but ultimately the final two issues are like, standard Batman detective fare, and then the last one is a big showdown between Batman and Mr. Whisper in a chapel, like exactly what you would expect from a Batman comic. But it's very much horror oriented because it does deal with the rather disturbing past of not even just Bruce Wayne, but of the character of Mr. Whisper and some other religious stuff that I won't get into. And then on the like more quote unquote schlocky end is Batman the Black Glove, which is definitely horror oriented, but I would say that's mostly in visuals. Where you have the horrific image of I think his name is Mr. Hart, who is like has been skinned alive, and Simon Hurt is wearing his skin as like a costume, and he's pretending to be this Guy Hart, who's like the tycoon who brought the Club of Heroes together. But it's schlocky in the sense that it's like they brought a bunch of these superheroes to an island and they're kind of just toying with them. It's like have you ever seen that movie Cube?
yeah.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
like
yeah.
it's like Cube, but instead of being a bunch of Canadian actors you've never heard of, it's the Club of Heroes from the DC universe. So yeah, I mean, I feel like with a character like Batman, you can get all different ends of the spectrum. Just depends on what kind of story you're trying to tell.
Agreed.
Exactly. And
And as far
you know,
as that Sweeney psychological, I forget how you put it, but it sounded okay. So there is another kind of horror that I feel like is a lot easier to capture in comics than it has been in film for quite a long time, and that's the romantic horror. And I want to say romantic horror. I don't mean like classic Dracula, although in film that's what I would be referring to. But like of the saga of the Swamp Thing from Alan Moore, I would almost call that a romantic horror. I would call that a romantic horror.
I would push back on that, but I'm interested to hear what you're going to say.
And I would say the same thing about Ram V's run with the Swamp Thing, but I say romantic horror in it's very poetic, almost like quite literally at times, and it's something that is psychological, but it's also emotionally investing as well. And maybe romantic isn't the right kind of word to use there, because I would also pull in like the entire Sandman universe into this pretty much as well. Sandman and the Dreaming, House of Weepers, that kind of stuff, or House of Whispers, House of Weepers. I feel like those would all qualify as romantic horror too. But now I'm very curious as to what you've got to say about that.
Yeah, well, I think I push back just because, again, I've made it no secret to those who have heard me ramble on about comics on our other podcast, which you should definitely listen to. I think the reason I push back on that is because I don't know that I would call it romantic horror. I guess the way I always thought of it was it's a mix of romance and horror, but I don't know that the two are linked. So you have, obviously, the love story of Swamp Thing and Abigail Arcane, but it doesn't really show that as a horrific relationship. If anything, it's more how that relationship is what pulls Alec out of his more horrific moments, or vice versa for Abby. What I think I like about the horror of Swamp Thing, at least for parts of that series, when it's not dipping into the more like philosophical, heady stuff of like. If you're in a relationship with a plant and the world rejects it, what lengths will people go to deny that? And there's a lot of stuff that kind of gets all over the place. But I think that could be a whole other discussion. But I think where the story excels in horror is it definitely, as you said, dives into the psychological and does it in a way that it doesn't feel like self-indulgent or anything, and I know Alan Moore has been accused of that in other works, but it very much feels like it's trying to capture horror that is I guess relatable would be the right word. I'm thinking of an interview that he gave from like 1985, and he was trying to talk about what they were trying to capture with their version of Swamp Thing and how it differed from the Len Wein, Bernie Wrightson version, which I think was more like classic gothic horror. Your creepy house, creepy swamp monster, like that kind of stuff. And the Len Wein stuff is great. Yeah, that stuff is great, and doesn't get nearly enough credit. But I think what Alan was trying to dip into was like, okay, what is terrifying right now? What is contemporary horror? I think would be the best way to describe it. So there's a whole element of like, it's a little dated, but like the fear of nuclear annihilation, the fear of war, the fear of pollution and things
quite
that
the contrary, man. All of that shit is like literally possible right now.
I mean, it's definitely still relevant, but I think it was a lot more. I guess it would depend on who you ask, but I think it was definitely hot button then when we were still in the midst of the Cold War, and everyone is still kind of afraid of what the Soviet Union is going to do. Although, goodness
everybody
knows,
had a picture of Ronald Reagan in their house.
I know. I hope I'm saying that by saying that now that I'm not like speaking some horrible thing into existence, and inside of 5 years the Soviet Union has regained its former glory, or has reformed itself. But I'm like afraid to say like, oh yeah, that stuff isn't relevant at all. Like the Soviet Union doesn't even exist anymore, and then 10 years from now there is a Soviet Union again. I feel like an asshole.
It'll be all your fault.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I think one of the reasons that I kind of was like, I don't know that I would call it romantic horror, is just because, I'm sorry, I hope I'm not giving these long-winded answers, but I'm just so excited to be doing this again. But I think one of the reasons that I don't know that I classify it that way is just because I feel like it mixes romance and horror, but I don't know that they're linked that closely. It's more like both elements coexist in the book, but they're not dependent on each other. I don't know if I'm defining that in the right way,
Well,
but
I mean, no,
that's
I
what I'm
get
trying
it
to
because
say.
there is the horror part of that story, and then it
Mhm.
is the relationship between him and Abigail that goes throughout the whole book is
Yeah,
kind of
it's like
independent of everything that's there. But
yeah, it's like
I guess
the issue that oh sorry, just one more thing. It's like the issue that everyone knows that I'm blanking. I want to say it's like issue 38. The famous or 38 or 37 because it's after one of my favorite issues, Pog. Um, but it's the acid trip issue that everyone loves to talk
oh
about where he gives Abby the beat and she like loses her mind. And it's their first kind of like shared interpersonal experience. It's the closest thing they can do to have sex. But it's like this close personal moment, and I'm thinking of that in the context of romance and horror. And I see the romance, but I don't really see the horror in that. So I think that's what I was trying to get at. And like the romance exists, very important to the story, but I don't know how closely it's tied to horror. But anyway, I'll shut up now. Isaiah, feel free to chime in because I've been talking too much.
I like Swamp Thing. That's all I got for you. You guys have me beat when it comes to like the little nuances in certain comic books, specifically in the superhero dumb that is DC, and to others Marvel. But you know what, I'm gonna say this, and people can fight me day and night. I think if one of the two were capitalizing on horror, it would definitely be DC. They have way more moments, way more opportunities. I mean, remember that video that I shared with you guys, and it was talking about the villains in the DC universe that could progressively get scarier based on like their capabilities. And just looking at some of those villains, whom most of which I have no idea who they are, and what they are capable of, is way more impactful than majority of what I've seen in Marvel. So at the
oh yeah, as far as horror goes, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I would say, with the exception of probably one of the best, I'm just gonna say one of the best horror books that was coming out in the past couple of years, and I'm sure people will push back on this, but having read that book from 1 to 50, it just feels impossible to deny, and that's Immortal Hulk, which takes the
yeah,
basic concept of Hulk, of the psychological profile of Bruce Banner, and tells one of the best damn horror stories you'll ever read. And yes, there are definitely moments of like schlocky action where it's, Bruce in like a deformed Hulk state or whatever, just beating the crap out of whatever villain he's facing. But I think it does such a great job of showing the horrific transformations, certainly the incredibly fractured and fucked up profile of Bruce Banner, and just showing how horrific it would actually be to wrestle with all of that in one body. So, with the exception of that, yeah, Marvel is probably a little lacking, but Immortal Hulk was one that caught everyone by surprise, and I think that's why people loved it so much.
Yeah.
yeah, it definitely pulled through with that grotesque imagery and some of the
Hmm.
psychological effects that being the Hulk and being Bruce Banner has caused him. It was definitely a phenomenal run, and
Hmm.
which it's crazy because I when I look at Hulk, I think for me the equivalent would be like Swamp Thing.
Hmm.
It's just more nature based. So I like how the two are kind of like. Well, I want to say Swamp Thing is kind of like holding horror down for DC.
Yeah.
It's definitely
Yeah.
but I like how the two, at least for me, kind of like mirror each other. They're
Hmm.
both doing a good job at that. I think I
Absolutely.
would like. I think I would like to see more horror based with like your symbiotes, and they
Hmm.
made you know the King in Black way more action. It could have
Yeah.
been creepier, scarier. But even with like some of the Carnage comics, I think they could be scarier because he's such
Hmm.
a an intimidating creature in the way his appearance is.
Definitely.
But
Yeah.
He's a
And
gnarly
I
looking
think
dude. All of the symbiotes are.
yeah,
yeah. And I think one of the things that, because I agree with you what you're saying on the Hulk and Swamp Thing comparison. I'd also want to point out another one that I didn't even realize until I remember I came to this realization. I think it was one of the episodes that Kirk and I did of the Marvel show. And it just seems so obvious to me that I can't believe I'd ever missed it before. But it was the comparison of, Bruce Banner and the Hulk persona to Jekyll and Hyde, which is like classic horror.
Oh yeah,
And
absolutely.
and once I made that connection, I was like, oh my god, that's why the Hulk is like the perfect horror character to have. And I all this time, because you see like the Marvel movies, or maybe you read like an old back issue of Hulk, and it's mostly just like running around, smash stuff, Hulk smash, like kind of the generic action fare that you would get. But using that model of like the dual persona of, okay, here is the more timid, more respectful persona that I present to the world, and under the surface is the horrific monster that has to manifest at night. And using that as like a Jekyll and Hyde model is like, oh my god, this is genius. How did I never think of this before, and how did no one ever think to explore that before? And I'm sure other Hulk authors have. I just hadn't had the chance to read them. But once I like saw that connection, I was like, this is why it works so well. So yeah, I think that's an element of why it probably connected with people. It's like that dual persona of, here's the sensible me that I present to the world. Here's the one that I hide in the dark, but ultimately manifests and I can't control it. And what do you do with that? So a lot of cool stuff there.
Definitely. I definitely enjoy everything you're saying about that, because that it does hold true very well. But with that, we're going to take a quick break.
Now, back to our program.
Alrighty. I hope you guys had a good moment to fill up your chippies and your drink, your little Wawa, and ready to continue on our discussion with all things spooky in your your Amazon Kindles, because of course that's where you read all your comic books, or your iPad, right? Of course, yeah, exactly. Your phone. I thought a screen, right? Comic, screen, book. No, who cares?
Oh god, reading comics on your phone, kill me. It's so hard. Can't do it.
You can do it on your tablet. Hey, not everybody's
your
got
tablet,
luxuries, man. You make do with what you can.
It's just it's because my phone is small, and like trying to like zoom in and look at it is like agony. It's agony. Why do you think I have these glasses?
Well, to pick up on
I've got context.
This issue, this issue, I guess you could call it one of
Yes.
our issues. Not a Robot Screen podcast. So since we've last talked, and you've mentioned this already, that you have been delving into this, and that your fascination with horror has grown, and now you are a connoisseur of all things spooky and dark. And I just want to hear, what are some of the new things that you have discovered?
My pleasure. I'll try to keep this relatively brief, but Lord knows it won't be. But yeah, no, as Isaiah said, and as we discussed the last time we were here, wasn't. I mean, I literally just said, I don't know why I'm recapping it, but wasn't the biggest horror fan.
Fine,
was somehow radicalized over the course of the pandemic, and now I have a refined taste like a sous chef. So there were a couple of ones that I picked out for this episode. I think ones that I tried to focus on ones that I read more recently that were still kind of fresh in my mind. And I kind of split it up into two sections, ones that are still coming out now, and ones that are more classic, but I think are definitely worth your time. I'm going to start off with one that I hope Isaiah has read, but if he hasn't, that's okay, because I haven't read Black Hole, but it's one that I've been screaming at him to read over on Discord, and that is The Closet by James Tynion and Gavin Fullerton. I think
damn it, I forgot to read that too.
Yeah, no, it's it's all good. It's all good, because I said I was gonna read Black Hole and I did it. So we're on equal footing. But this is a 3-issue series that just came out from Image. It was actually being serialized over on a Substack. But I kind of opted to just read it when it was coming out, issue by issue. And this one I think definitely falls into the psychological one that we're talking about, but also a bit of a different one that I don't know if we've touched on. But it's I guess I don't know if this is a specific genre, but I would call it the genre of familial horror, like family horror, that really just focuses on like a family and the dysfunctional aspects of that and how that is horrific to the reader or to anyone else that's taking in the story. So what The Closet does really well in this genre is it's a pretty simple premise. A family is getting ready to move across the country, and it specifically focuses on the father and their youngest son, Jamie, because the mother has flown out. But it's kind of looking at their travels across the country, or at least the last two issues do. The first issue just kind of sets up the dynamic. But what it does really well with the familial horror genre is that it takes the idea of a dysfunctional family and uses that as a mechanism to create the horrific monster that you see, because throughout the story Jamie is plagued by this small shadowy demon that is hiding in his closet, hence the name. And he's just terrified that this creature is going to come with him even when they're getting ready to move across the country, and his father's just like, don't worry about this, like it's not anything that will concern you, but the monster keeps creeping up. But as you later learn, well, I don't want to spoil it too much, but I kind of already feel like I have, so at this point, oh well. But as we later learn, and
Too late now.
Yeah, what I love about the series is that it never tells you, but it's so subtle that I feel like a lot of people are gonna miss it, but it does it so well. Where it presents the manifestation of the creature as a product of Jamie's dysfunctional family, because when they get to the to their final destination in, I think it's Portland, and they're setting up, and they're finally made it across the country, and it looks like everything is going well. We discover that the marital problems that had been plaguing Jamie's parents in the first issue have continued even at the end, and sure enough, the monster that Jamie thought had been abandoned back in his old home in New York is right there in the closet in Portland. And I was like, that is so genius, because it's again, it doesn't have to say it doesn't have to spell it out, but that's just a byproduct of Jamie's fears of his parents, fighting and dysfunctional relationship. And it was when I got to that last page, I was like, fuck, that is such a great ending to have. Because it just wrapped everything up so well. But there are a lot of other great moments in that series that really touch on why Jamie's parents are kind of having their their problems in their marriage, and in a lot of ways kind of highlights. And this is where I'm a little out of my depth because I'm not married, so I can't speak on it all that well. But it kind of talks about like the dysfunctions of marriage and sort of how you kind of feel like you're past your prime, or in some ways you feel like the days of your youth and the moments where you could kind of just have the free life that you enjoyed in like your 20s or whatever, are past you and they're gone. And it's almost presenting like aging as an element of horror, which I don't, maybe I was reading into it too much, but it was there are a couple of scenes where Jamie's father is having conversations with friends and with also other people, and he constantly brings up the fact that he feels like as he has settled into his family and everything else and has the life that a lot of people would aspire towards, like you have a wife that loves you, you have an adorable child, you have a job that pays well, and you're financially secure, you should be happy, right? But it's this feeling of dissatisfaction around, yes, I have all these things, but the days where I could kind of just go off and be wild and do whatever I wanted to do, where I was unattached and didn't have to worry about all these connections, are gone and they're past. And it's like the life that I'm living now is almost horrific. And I was, again, I can't really relate to that, because like I'm exactly what Jamie's father is describing. I'm someone who is in their 20s and is quote unquote living the life that he's describing. But I understand what he's trying to say, and I think that's such a brilliant idea of presenting that dissatisfaction as like an element of horror. That's something that's haunting him. Like he can't escape how unhappy he is with the perfect life that he should be enjoying, that everyone is telling him that he should be enjoying, but that he ultimately can't enjoy. And that's the tragedy of it all, that No matter how perfect it may seem to others, it's not what he wants, and that haunts him. So it's brilliant. It's wonderfully illustrated by Gavin Fullerton. Very minimalistic art, but I think that works well for the story. And I would highly recommend it. I feel like it's gonna fly under the radar just because it's kind of short, and I don't know that it made like a ton of waves, but I feel like it's gonna be one of those like cult horror titles that a lot of people will come to, may not have high expectations, but leave it being really satisfied. So that's why I've been needling you, Isaiah, to read it because I feel like you're gonna love it. But yeah.
Well,
Sounds great, man.
we have an unofficial word from our sponsor. Do you also have a dysfunctional family? Well, True Blue fix
Oh my
sad
God.
wiener that's also causing demons to appear in your children's closet. True Blue. No, I'm just fucking with you.
God, if that were true.
Yeah,
True
the
Blue Demon be gone.
Yeah.
Not only will it prevent the demons, it'll give you a rock hard penis.
Yeah.
No, that's a great concept, and and it's the fact, and I looked up images of it, and it's very Guillermo del Toro esque with like the way that this
Yeah.
character looks, and I'm like, ugh,
Absolutely, yeah.
I'm a big Guillermo del Toro stan, but it's something that you mentioned how it's a very psychological, and I think that's in the way like the family dynamic is. I think that's a very important aspect in horror because I think what really scares us the most, and obviously we've seen plenty of horror. I mean, we've seen your pumpkin heads, we've seen your serial killers, we've seen your just your gremlins and your leprechauns and all things that shouldn't be scary or are scary typically or are quote unquote supposed to be scary. We've seen them all. But the things that really get under your skin, the real things that make you like, I don't think I should have watched that movie, are the things that are like very plausible to occur. You know, we look at, witches, and it's about these quote unquote witches that live in this New England forest where people are selling other people to these entities for their own personal greed. So it usually has something to do with these cardinal sins. And then you got this, in the closet, you got this marriage that's like crumbling and it's causing despair to their child, and no one has any understanding of what's the other person is going through, thus causing more turmoil and causing things to arise that may not have occurred if everything was fine. And we
So
see this
fucking good.
and you see this in other like things like things that are very plausible, and like even some things that are not necessarily scary, they still stick with you, like I said, Destroyer. It's a callback to Frankenstein, and it has to do with like real world scenarios that are still going on to this day. I mean, not the issue, the issues came out in like 2017, so it's not like it's super old. But even like Black Hole, like it's not a scary comic, but because it's so relatable, it's so real, like STDs. When you just hear about you got one, it's like even if it's something that it's curable, it's
Terrifying. Yeah, it's terrifying.
Yeah, and also the unknown. I think that's another big aspect in horror, and that's why I think other than the imagery itself, that's why Gideon Falls is so terrifying. Because
it's like, are you more afraid of the boogeyman in your closet, or are you more afraid of finding out that a loved one has uncurable sickness? Both of those are horrific things, but one of them cuts deep, like personally, and that's something that just it kills you. And that's the stuff that just gets to me, where it's like that is horror on a level that just that cuts right into your mind. Like, yes, it's there's a horrifying monster or something like that, but it's that fear of losing a loved one or having something taken away from you that really just cuts deep.
Sinister.
Sinister, or The Strangers. These are all plausible things that are just very unsettling because it's possible. I mean, when I first watched I Saw the Devil, a Korean film, I would triple check my locks because I was so worried somebody's gonna break in and do something to my family that I would not wish on my worst enemies. And so I think it's those things, and why I think The Closet, which I'm definitely going to check out now that you gave me this wonderful synopsis, uh, is so tantalizing to me because it's something that is plausible, you know. And don't get me wrong, there are things that like they will not occur, like the Drifting Classroom by Kazuo Umezu. Um, that's never going to happen. Your entire classroom's not going to be magically
No.
transported to isekai to another
I mean,
fucking world.
I guess never say never, but like probably not.
Man, I mean, if Chuck Kun comes by and decides it's my time to
Oh
go to a new
God,
world, I guess I'll take
it's
it.
it's over.
But like, you know, even though it's not real, it has a strong imagery that's like, damn, I would not want this to occur to me personally.
Right? Very much
um,
so. Same
yeah,
same with the Nameless. Same with Nameless from Morrison.
Yes, which
You
is
look at
which
that
is
shit and you
one
go,
that
"Oh no, just no."
yeah. Well, so Nameless, I read. Nameless was ooh yeah. Nameless was a tough one because I remember going into it and there was a lot of controversy around it
Malevolent
because
asteroid
there are
Zabalba.
people. Yeah, there are people that love it, and there are people that absolutely hate it. And I am someone who definitely, I'm gonna sound like such a fence sitter, but I'm definitely someone who falls in the middle of that because there are moments where I see the brilliance of it, and I love the idea of the cosmic horror aspect of it, but also tying in the. I don't want to spoil it too much, but I'm gonna end up doing it anyway. I'm sorry. But Nameless is like 6 years old at this point. Like it's kind of on you. But
Yeah, a
the
little bit
idea of
longer, maybe.
presenting, yeah, the idea of presenting the idea of God as potentially as a cosmic horrific demon, that's genius. But I think where a lot of it kind of gets lost is, at least for me, was I think it spent a little bit too much time on the nameless character who's just called Nameless. Uh, on how crazy he's going and not enough time really exploring the idea of if a cosmic deity that had formerly presented itself to the world as God were to exist and was basically coming here to destroy the earth and bring about the end times, what exactly would that mean for the rest of the world? What kind of implications would that have? And that was the stuff that I wanted to see, but we didn't really get to see. And I think it spent a little too much time all over the place. But that's why I think Nameless is a little bit of a controversial one. I think it also got a little bit too lost with some of the literary and religious references that just completely went over my head because Lord knows I'm not a religious anthropologist, whatever kind of expert. I mean, I know my stuff here and there, but even I have my limits. So there were just like there would be like a number of references to, biblical angels, and I'm like, I don't know what the hell that is. But there was apparently a guide in the back of the trade that explained all the references, which I think is helpful, but it's in the back, so it kind of presumes that you need to finish the book before. So you're gonna read it,
flip 'em back
be
and forth.
yeah, it's like you're gonna read it, be completely confused, then come to the glossary, and then you're like, oh, okay, I guess I probably should have went to this first. But I think that's why Nameless is a little more of a controversial one.
well, that's a really shitty thing to do. Like, like it's like we have a story,
Yeah.
but it's kind of an inside joke. But if you read it all the way, we'll give you those inside jokes, and then you'll
Mhm.
think it's great, right?
Yeah.
Right? Right?
Right.
Mhm.
Right?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Jesus,
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
a tentacle monster, hentai.
Yeah.
And
And
Vampire Slayer.
I'm glad you mentioned Nameless because one of the classics I was going to mention was one that I also read recently called Kid Eternity, which is a bit of an older one from Grant Morrison and Duncan Fegredo from the '90s. It's your classic like Vertigo book, even though it predates
Wasn't.
Vertigo
Yeah.
shortly. But that one is I mean it's essentially taking the character, the classic. I think he was like a quality comics character, like one of those obscure characters that DC bought and later folded into their universe. But taking that character and giving it a horrific twist. So Kid Eternity, who was known to summon the spirits of famous dead people, has now been living in hell for an extended period of time, has been summoned to Earth, and needs to find the maps of hell to locate his old friend. I think his name is Mr. something, Mr. Whimper or something like that, or it's not Mr. Whisper, that's another one, or Mr. Quimper or something, and then use that to fight off demonic entities known as the Qlipoth. And that was the first time I'd ever heard that word in my life. Qlipoth, Qliphoth, Qlipothic, which are apparently entities in the Kabbalistic mythology of Judaism. So again, that's what I'm talking about. Where that's what I'm talking about. Where it's like it has a lot of these deeper religious references that if you have no context for that, it's just like what the fuck, I don't know. But I guess if you do a little bit more research, it can kind of give you the full story. I think that was a good one, but it definitely falls into some of the tropes that a lot of the pre-Vertigo kind of Vertigo books fall into during that period. But it's definitely an interesting read. I will give it that.
Speaking of interesting reads, Isaiah, this all started you asking modern things that we've read. I haven't read a lot that's been modern. I caught all 13 issues of The Silver Coin, which I think we can all agree were all fucking amazing. Well, the whole series was amazing. Most of the issues were pretty.
Some better than others, but yeah, most of them pretty solid.
Yep. And then I almost forgot to bring it up, but we've been talking, and we're all three of us are big, huge fans of Witches by Scott Snyder and Jock. And there's a 10-issue run by Jeff Lemire and Jock, and it rides that. It's another one that kind of rides that fence of being horror, because it's called Snow Angels, and it kind of rides that fence of the like The Village from M. Night Shyamalan. It kind of runs along the lines of that trope, where you're stuck in this bubble. This is where you need to be. There's nothing that exists outside of this bubble. Or, well, they call it the trench. And these two girls, they decide. Every single panel in this book is like, oh sweet, oh sweet, oh sweet. So I don't want to give away too much, but throughout the course of the book, these two girls are moving along, and they've got to make their way outside of the trench, and all of the things that they find along the way, everything that they go through. And then at the end of it, they end up having to fight a snowman, or the snowman, rather, I should say. And it's a hell of a book. I'm assuming by the looks on y'all's faces, neither one of you have read it.
I have, but I didn't finish it. I think I just it kind of lost the plot with me a little. So I read season 1, but I did not finish season 2. I loved the idea of it. I mean, Jock and Scott Snyder are known as a kind of a notorious pair, so the idea of him working with Jeff Lemire was exciting. It's like when Dave Gibbons started working with Frank Miller on Martha Washington. It's like, ooh, all right, we're trying a different combination. Yeah, like we're trying a different combination. All right. But while I loved Give Me Liberty, I wasn't in love with Snow Angels. I like the family stuff. Jeff Lemire is an expert at doing that and capturing the family drama and the ennui. But I think it kind of lost me a little bit. So I'm sure at some point I'll come back and finish season 2. But the first season, at least, I was kind of more mixed on it.
Yeah, I
love the concept of it.
The first season only had 4 issues, and then the second season is the last 6. So it's 10 issues altogether. So pretty much a small run, but I enjoyed it. I don't know. I guess would you call that adventure horror? At what point do we start separating
I don't
things? Because
know.
I don't want we get down that slippery slope, and the next thing you know, Laura Croft is horror. So
Exactly. I would probably
Isaiah's
call
got
that
an
horror.
argument for it.
Oh man.
I
Is
would
Tomb
say, I
Raider
don't know.
horror? Oh man.
It could be. You could make a great Tomb Raider
You could
horror.
you could call it if we're going down the rabbit hole, I guess you could call it historical horror, right? It's like it's tapping
there we go.
because or
Archaeological horror.
or archaeological horror because it's tapping into the aspects of archaeological that can be a little bit more horrific and terrifying. I would say probably more in the case of the newer Tomb Raider games. I don't know so much about the older ones. Those ones are probably a little more like schlocky, but
Do you have any more recommendations for us?
yes, these ones I will cycle through much faster. And then I'll pass the baton over to Josh.
I've only got two more, but that's it.
Okay. So we're talking about Jeff Lemire. So perfect segue because I have two from him. What a surprise, right? The man is like just does a million fucking things at once. But the first one was and this is where I'm struggling to remember if I mentioned it the last time. And if I did, I'm like, oh crap, I'm just repeating myself. But him and Sorrentino, his partner on Gideon Falls, are doing a new horror-themed universe called the Boneyard Orchard Mythos, or the Bone or I always screw it up. It's the Bone Orchard Mythos, and it's basically like a series of separate horror titles that are all under one banner. So it's almost more of an imprint, except it's just him and Sorrentino. And they put out a graphic novel called The Passageway, which was I would say if you want my more in-depth review of that, it's kind of defunct now, but I'm trying to get it started again. But I did kind of review of that on the Indie Corner, where I enjoyed it, but I think it was a little shorter than it needed to be, because I feel like it spent a little bit not enough time on kind of fleshing out the characters and the world before really delving into the like crazy psychological stuff. But I would say if you're a fan of The Lighthouse, check that one out. It kind of taps into that area a little bit. And they also put out a free comic book day issue that's like a standalone adventure, like a full just 20-page one. So it's not like promoting anything. It's literally just like, here's what we're doing, here's a taste of it, but it's a completely separate tale that is not related to anything else. And that one I actually really liked, and kind of got me excited for the next series, which is coming up soon, called 10,000 Feathers, I think, or 10,000 Black Feathers or something like that. So that one, I'm excited for what the universe promises, but ultimately I think I'll have to wait and see before I can make like any conclusive statements on it as a whole. And then he also has Lemire has teamed up with his old Descender partner, Dustin Wen, to do a new horror-themed series called Little Monsters, which I debated leaving off because I that's another one that's like, does it really count as horror? I don't know. Or is it more like supernatural? Like, what are we doing here? Because the premise is just basically kid vampires in a post-apocalyptic universe. That's it. But I put it under horror because I feel like the horror elements stem more from the idea that these children have been abandoned and they're sort of unsure of their place in the world, and they're coming into contact with the last dregs of civilization for the first time. And that's throwing them for a spin.
And the covers are creepy as fuck.
Yeah, the covers are very terrifying, especially the one to the first issue from Doug Mankey, which I was like, fuck the main cover. I'm picking this one up because it's great. And it's a picture of one of the people that had basically went around and recruited, I think the character is called like the Master, or the Elder or something like that. And basically the story is like the Elder has existed for an indefinite or unknowable amount of time, so we don't know how ancient he is, but he's basically been going through time and recruiting these children and turning them into vampires, and it's usually children who have been in like unfortunate situations. So like one is one is like a runaway, and they're like stowaways in the 1930s. One was like living in the 1600s, and his caretaker had just died. One was living during the time of the third pandemic in the far and distant 2030s, which was, I saw that, it was like issue 4, and I was like, oh crap, no, don't even say that. Don't even joke about that being a thing. But basically, this guy comes around and recruits these children who have been in unfortunate or deplorable circumstances, and recruits them to be vampires, and then at some point in the post-apocalyptic future has just completely abandoned them, and they're all on their own. So I think the elements of like abandonment and confusion and first contact with the hostile remnants of humanity, I feel like those kind of fall under horror. But I would implore you to read the series for yourself to kind of determine it. It's slow, and it kind of really takes its time developing some of these characters, but I feel like in the long run it's going to be more satisfying. Right now I'm still like kind of on the fence about how long I'm going to stick with it. It just wrapped its first arc, but I think ultimately we'll see how it all lands up. And then the last one I had is one that just wrapped up quite recently, called Homesick Pilots, from Dan Waters, who is someone I have like always had on my radar, but I hadn't really been reading his stuff. But I think it's probably just because he's been doing stuff at DC. Like, let's not even dance around the fact. Because he's been doing more Cape stuff, it kind of encouraged me to check out his other work. And one of them was a very exciting title called Homesick Pilots, which I feel like is another one that kind of rides the line between supernatural and horror, but I think at least for its horror elements, it's more of like a commentary on kind of like Little Monsters. It's like more of the horrific elements of people who have been abandoned or left behind, and really trying to delve into what it would be like to be in those unfortunate circumstances. And so what it does in that respect is it's set all in like this old house, and all of these objects are haunted by the spirits of people that used to own them that were in these unfortunate circumstances. And so we get more context on their stories and that sort of stuff. And that's where I feel like the horror actually comes in, and we get more of a sense of the world and everything else. So those are some of the more current ones that I've read, and I think you should definitely check those out too. So I'll pass the baton over to Josh, and he can recommend some good ones too.
Okay, so good ones, we'll see. I'm just kidding. First, I want to do almost like an honorable mention. Something that I did hear, well, right after we started talking about doing this episode, I went back and reread the 1998 annuals. Yeah, 1998. And it was all the annuals in 98 it was called DC Ghosts. And they all had to go back and deal with the undead. Some of them was like their own skeletons, that kind of stuff. They were pretty good reads. That's just like a fun honorable mention.
What books were those? I'm curious. I don't know that I've heard of that.
I'd have to pull up the list here, but let me do that real quick. 1998 DC. Aquaman, Batman, The Flash, Green Lantern, JLA, Martian Manhunter, Superman, and Wonder Woman.
I've never heard of this one before, actually. Yeah.
Yep. Obvious. It's like an overarch. It's like I wouldn't quite say it's a story arc, but it's more like just like a theme shared between the different heroes and whatnot. The one that I've been reading is most recently that has turned out to be it's fucked up. I'm just gonna put that out there. This book is fucked up. Not don't read it fucked up, but Okay, so imagine Macbeth wrapped up in a lot of blood, way more creepiness, and professional wrestling.
I do like that.
It's called the Crimson Cage.
Hmm.
Have you ever read Sync?
Sync. No, I don't think I have.
All right, it's a pretty decent book. Same creative team that's on this one, John Lees and Alex and Ashley Cormack are on the Crimson Cage as well, and
Hmm.
it's super good. So it's 1984. It's New Orleans. A dude named Chuck Frenzy is the main event star of like this local pro wrestling deal, and he wants to be top shit. He stumbles upon a way of doing. He meets somebody who will help him become top shit, but only if he does something absolutely despicable. And it goes from there. It's on 5 issues so far, and
Hmm.
it is so good.
I have to check that one out. Yeah, no,
You
that's
definitely should. It's
God,
messed
I'm
up.
excited. I have some recommendations that I haven't even seen. Feel like a kid in a candy
it's
store.
it's AWA, but
Okay.
it is
Yeah,
it yeah.
I know AWA, but I haven't. Yeah, I feel like AWA. I don't want to get off topic, but I feel like AWA. They always have super interesting books, and some of them I check out, but some of them just completely fly under the radar until they're over. Like there was
Yep.
one I read recently from AWA called Redemption, which was by an author I'd never even heard of, Krista Faust, who I guess primarily worked in novels. Krista Faust and Mike Diodato, and it's like this kind of almost
I know
sci-fi
Diodato.
western themed. Yeah, and it was great. And I was like, how did I not see this at all? And it's almost a shame because I feel like probably a lot of stores just don't stock a lot of copies of these books because I don't know that AWA is the most popular publisher out there. So a lot of it probably
I
just
think
flies under my radar, but it's a shame. Because they had that one. They had Not All Robots from Mark Russell, which was great, but that one kind of flew under
Not
my
All
radar
Robots was
initially.
super good.
And another one I read recently, Marjorie Finnegan, Temporal Criminal from Garth Ennis and Garan Suzuka, which was just like madcap fun. I was like, damn, why do I never see these books when they come out? Like, where the hell are they? I gotta put my notifications on my phone so I can find out when there's a new one.
You got to sign up for League of Comic Geeks and put shit on your
Yeah,
poll. And then every week you got to go back and do more and more and more and more and more.
yeah, yeah,
There's no way to keep track of everything without having some kind of huge fucking database. I've given up.
yeah, yeah. I know. Seriously, it's too much. It's too much. But please keep going.
I have just one more. We've talked about basically everything that's in my top 20 list. Or now I wouldn't say my top 20 list, in my top 10 list. And then we talked about the outsides, like Deceased and The Boys and the Umbrella Academy. But one thing I am curious about is, okay, just according to the things that you have read, what would you two consider to be the best horror book that you've devoured?
I feel like it's still kind of hard for me to say. I mean, there are ones that I love, but I don't know if I have the absolute best one as of yet. I would say probably the closest is maybe Witches. That's definitely the one that I would come back to regularly, but I'm still waiting on my best. But I can tell you the best one I read recently, one that I would also highly recommend. But I'll let Isaiah answer first. He probably has a more definitive answer than that. It's a little
Witches
wishy-washy.
is my number two.
So I haven't really been in the comic book, at least in the American sense of comic book game, at least for the over the summer.
Mhm.
But I in my recommendations will actually come in the form of some manga that I've actually read that were specifically horror oriented. So for those weeaboos out there that you got to
Hey,
read
that's
your
comics,
manga.
man.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
comics.
Don't pretend it's anything else.
It's
But
all comics.
as a part of okay. So let's say our Japanese comic family from across the pond. So from those, and then I've read one actual novel that is horror.
Ooh.
And between all of them, I would say in the comic verse, well, at least okay. So I guess in the graphic novel verse, I would say the one that really got me the most was probably Gideon Falls. That one was just everything and you know and a side of fries. Um, in
Right.
terms of like the manga side that I've read, and for those that want to check this out, I would say I Am a Hero was probably my favorite. It follows a manga artist assistant who he's not he's very socially awkward and not necessarily right in the head. And now he's basically like your side character. He is player number 4. He's the character you forget, but
Yeah.
he now has to survive in a zombie apocalypse, and it's very surreal. The imagery is pretty high, and him changing from this really like wallflower character to I'm the protagonist now, and I'm gonna fucking survive. And that one was great. It wasn't more so scary, but it was very like you wanted to keep reading to see what's gonna happen. And then in terms of
Was it Shogakukan? Is that who put it out?
I think so.
All right,
I-
I'm ordering some right now. I gotta check this out. It's got an omnibus. It's got an
Yeah.
omnibus. I'm checking it out.
I Am a Hero
But continue.
is great. HP's Lovecraft at the Mountains of Madness, which is actually an adaptation. That one, there's an
I
adaptation.
have
for
been
it.
like waiting for forever to just delve into Lovecraft, and I never get around to it, and I feel like such a fraud.
Well, now you can do it in manga form.
Oh, man.
And that was really good. And then I would say PTSD Radio. It has to do a lot with like folklores and like hair and how that's very important in certain areas of Japan. And then in terms of like novel, the one I read that really like just shook everything up was called The Law of the Sky. I want to say, I could be wrong, and it was intense. I didn't expect for it to the way it occurred. And there's a guy on TikTok that I follow, and he will also attest to it. Brandon Baker. He just reads all things like twisted and terrifying in novel form, and it's basically like Lord of the Flies plus 10. It is so intense. It's almost like your Boy Scout group. They're going out into they're going to go camping. It's going to be all great, but there's something out there that is brutalizing these children, and just the way that the author like describes how mangled and destroyed these children are as they're getting picked off one by one is it was I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
I couldn't like ration what I was reading. If I could pull up just a small excerpt from it, I would, but it's just like
Yeah.
it is, and it's only 200 pages. So anybody
The
out
Law
there,
of Yukai?
no, The Law of the Sky.
The Law of the Sky. Okay.
Yeah,
I would say oh, sorry. I was just gonna say if you really dug a lot of that Lovecraft stuff, I was gonna throw out if you ever read or interested in reading Neonomicon from Alan Moore, that is I think definitely one that delves a lot into Lovecraft's sort of special type of horror.
Hardcore.
Yeah, which again I can't really attest to having read none of Lovecraft, but from what I can discern from
I'll vouch
people's
for that.
discussions on the book, yes, and from what I understood from my reading, then yeah, it's apparently it does delve into that a lot. So I would recommend that. Although, and this is gonna sound weird, I would encourage you not to buy this book in print. If you can, read it digitally. Not because it's the preferred method, but because the Avatar press trades are so disgusting. I refuse to endorse them. They are literally the worst. It's such a pretentious thing to say.
It's
but
low quality.
They have the ugliest designs of any comic book publisher I have ever seen in my life. To the point where I'm like, I literally will not read your stuff in print. I cannot with good conscience. It is terrible. It's like worse than the ones that someone at a convention will just hand to you and be like, please support this, because at least they're like trying, but you know it's low budget because they don't have a lot of money. Avatar, it's like their design team is just terrible. And I think the worst is probably Crossed. Which is the design for that book, and the trade is making me want to vomit. But that is like such a it's such a I know it's such a pretentious thing to say about like such a minor thing, because ultimately the story is all that matters. But if you were me and you're someone that cares about that, I would say read it digitally. Don't read it in print. Otherwise, you're gonna have like just a aneurysm looking at it.
You're gonna have a bad time. Okay.
Yes, please continue.
Oh, that's all I got in terms of my recommendations. It does seem that I need to update myself, and so that we can have a round 3 of what.
For
is
sure.
Oh no, dude, you're good.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But like, no, like this stuff is important. Our myself, the audience, Josh, yourself.
Are you saying there's gonna be a Horror Comics 3? We're gonna do this again?
We should.
Absolutely.
Oh man.
You guys have to promise me that you guys will get into something in the Sandman universe. Hellblazer, The Dreaming, House of Whispers, Books of Magic.
Well,
Death,
I've read Hellblazer,
Lucifer,
but,
Dead Boy Detectives, something. Hell, even I Vampire is technically Sandman universe because he came from House of Mystery. But get
actually,
into
there's
that.
a really good I Vampire run from the New 52 from, coincidentally enough, Andrea Sorrentino, and
it's so good.
Yeah,
Bennett is a great character.
The first two trades of that run were really good. The last one was a little kind of crazy, but yeah, that's Joshua Hale Fialkov and Andrea Sorrentino, and that was another one of those like, let's try something a little cooler during the New 52 or a little bit more supernatural, and it didn't land. But they got 18 issues out of it, which is actually pretty impressive by today's standards.
No, he came from the he came from the Sandman universe too.
Yeah, well, I don't really know if that counts as much, because his creation. There's actually a really great video by this YouTuber I love, Strange Brain Parts, that delves into the entire history of I, Vampire. But he kind of talks about like how his origins are more of like the classic House of Mystery, like from the 80s prior to any of the formation of the Sandman stuff in like 1989, 1990 proper. So I don't know that I would really count that. Andrew Bennett is more of like the supernatural-ish character that's adjacent to superhero stuff, but isn't quite as divorced from everything as Sandman would eventually become. Hellblazer was like that, and then now he's just kind of like a part of the DC universe proper. But the classic Hellblazer stuff, oh,
definitely
so
not
good.
And
so
Cy
good.
Spurrier, dude, what an amazing Constantine writer. But
there's a great arc from Hellblade. It's one of my favorites. Also kind of on the subject of horror. It's Garth Ennis was writing the book, and it's basically Johnny goes to Johnny Constantine, as I'll call him, goes to NYC after whatever had been happening, and Papa Midnight sends him on a dream walk, and it basically takes him through hell, and he spends most of the entire time walking through hell with his trusted and loyal companion John F. Kennedy, with half his brains blown out. But it's just a really great, like, I don't know, exploration of American identity, while also kind of tying that in with horror as well. But that's what I mean when I talk about like classic Hellblazer. They could do some just wild, crazy, out there concepts, but man, they were so great.
And it sounds like they're reaching just for shock value there, And yeah, you get a shock when you see JFK's fucking head, a third of it's fucking missing. But the story that goes along with that shit is fucking phenomenal, dude.
Yeah.
Hardcore.
I think hands down, best Hellblazer issue has to be the Neil Gaiman one that he did with Dave McKean. And not only is that great horror, it's just a great Hellblazer issue. But okay, that's enough.
100%. But okay, so I feel like I can pick one book, one run, 11 issues that I can say that is the epitome of comic book horror for me. The author totally goes in, takes a legend with nothing but mystery, puts their own spin on it, adds conspiracy. The artwork is gruesome and gritty and scratchy, and they take the villain and turn it from just this mysterious butcher into this sociopathic, twisted person that can't separate love from death. And that book,
I think I know what you're talking about, but I'm interested.
Go ahead.
I knew.
No.
Wait, I know. Wait, do you want me to guess?
Yeah,
Is it From Hell?
it is. It is From Hell,
Yeah,
from
I
Alan Moore
figured.
and Eddie Campbell.
Oh, man.
my God, it's so good.
Oh,
It is so
damn,
good.
wait.
It's a lot of pages, dude. It's like I want to say it's like 600 pages, 500 to 600 pages. But man,
Wait, give me 1
So
second. I'll be right back.
fucking good. It's 11 issues, 600 pages between. I want to look it up. Hold on, because I want to say 600 sounds like a bit much.
No, it's really big. No, this is
576 pages.
Yeah, this is. Well, it's not one of
576
the.
pages.
It's not one of the originals, but it is a reprint of one of the From Hells from 1993 from Kitchen Sink Press that I got at New York Comic Con because Dennis Kitchen was there, and I was so excited because I loved everything that Kitchen Sink Press did, and I got him to sign it. And I remember reading this for the first time because I'd actually never read From Hell before. I heard it was more, but it was a very different more. It's like, okay, you've read your Swamp Things, you've read your it's like you've read your Swamp Things, you've read your your Watchmen, you've read Tom Strong, maybe you've read Wildcats, though I wouldn't recommend it. But that's all the kind of stuff that you would expect from Alan Moore. But From Hell, like when it's like that super scary movie that all your friends have seen and you haven't, and when they talk about it in like hushed tones, and they're like really serious about it. They're like, you've read your Alan Moore stuff, but From Hell, and like their whole facial expression changes, and they're like, this is some seriously fucked up stuff, and it very much is. But the thing, yeah,
it's fucked up, but it's fucked up in such a weird way that everything is pulled together like
and
perfectly crafted for this story. And it sounds weird to say like a conspiracy theory about the fucking Freemasons and the royal family and Jack Ripper coming together to make a horror comic book sounds fucking weird, but holy Christ.
Oh, but it
good,
works.
man.
Yeah, it works so well. And it is, and people know this already, but I have to say it just for the sake of saying it, but it is one of the most well-researched, if not the most well-researched comic books I have ever seen. Like there is, I mean, you can see it here, but literally in every issue there is, and it's in the collected edition as well, but there is
the
literally
footnotes.
There is an appendix of information
That's what's
breaking down every single fact and aspect of Ripperology, I think it's called, but just, on the subject of Jack the Ripper, every single aspect of the detective studies, of the case notes, of everything in painstaking detail. And I cannot imagine how long Alan Moore must have spent just reading on Ripperology and all that stuff on the Whitechapel murders. And keep in mind, this book came out in like, what was it, Josh, like 1990? So this is pre-internet.
91.
Yeah, this is pre-internet, which it just blows my mind. So yeah, From Hell. I can see why that's your top. That is one hell of a one.
It's a masterclass. And I 100% I'll stand by that for a very long time. It's at at risk of sounding weird as hell. This almost feels like reading a song. Just how how fucking, I know that sounds weird, but
terrifying, intense, very just like chilling and upsetting song, but a song nonetheless.
Yeah, and oh my God, Isaiah, if you have not got the chance to read this, get it. Get online and get it. If you can't, I will take pictures of my pages and email them to you.
It is long, it is procedural, but my God, it is just, it is one of the most compelling reads you will ever have. And again, for people who see Alan Moore's name on the cover, this is going to be very different from what you expect. Like I say that preface not as to not to be like, haha, it's it's all serious and about murder. Like, no, this is probably one of the most strange and just way off departures that Moore ever had in his career. Just doing something completely different than anything else.
Yeah, and like nobody else, man. So yeah, for sure. Isaiah, have you read this?
No.
Homework.
Oh yeah.
Homework.
If you read nothing else, read From Hell. Not even The Closet. Although again, I really want you to read that one. But
so what you're telling me is I need to read From Hell, and what else?
From Hell, The Closet, and Books of Magic.
Yeah, I mean, well, you don't have to finish it, because From Hell is just, again, it is this tome, but even getting like halfway through it or 3/4 through it or whatever, or even 1/4 through it, like you'll feel just the intense nature of the book. Yeah, like it's really something. Don't watch the movie, please. Don't watch the movie. It's terrible.
Oh yeah, the movie it's so bad. Like it shouldn't even be tied to the book.
That's fine.
The actor that they got to play the Ripper, I like him, but Ian Holm, I think his name is, but my God, it is so bad.
So bad.
It's a bad adaptation. It's a bad adaptation. I mean, it's not the worst movie ever, but it's just it's kind of a crappy adaptation. But that is one hell of a story.
From Hell by Alan.
It certainly is.
Mm-hmm.
You got any homework for me, Isaiah?
I would say
actually that's good.
So I'm gonna say definitely for you. Well, for Josh, since you weren't here last time, I would say if you haven't read Severed, read Severed.
Yes. Oh, you read Severed?
Yeah, because we brought that.
Yes.
We talked about
oh man. Oh, that makes me so happy.
Check out Severed. The Law of the Skies. Definitely read that. Like I said, it's a 200-page book. You'll get through it easily if you can read, From Hell or any run, your favorite runs. And I'm gonna say that's a good start.
All right. All right.
And then
duly noted. And from you, Brandon, other than do a power bomb.
Well, obviously The Closet, and certainly a couple of the others that I had mentioned. I'm going back to my list. Ones that we'd already talked about, Gideon Falls and Witches. Those are ones that you definitely got to check out. Kid Eternity, while not perfect, I think is worth checking out, and it's one that'll definitely get you thinking. And Nameless, controversial and confusing though it may be, I would recommend it. Just
I thought it was
for yourself.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's like just read it for yourself, and if you're able to come to the end of it and feel satisfied, then I think it did its job, or close enough. And a couple others that I wanted to mention, just on the subject of like the classics. One that I think is probably not going to be labeled as horror, or I think they tried to sell it as a horror book, and it didn't really work because everyone just kind of saw it as like a noir mystery type of story. But that was one that I had kind of been on my radar too that I wanted to check out, but I never did, called A Walk Through Hell from Garth Ennis and Garan Suzuka, which is a book that they tried to sell as like a contemporary horror. And what that means is like horror that is kind of like I was saying earlier with Swamp Thing. It's like horror that's appropriate for the era. So this one is almost a direct response to political division, or social division, or however you want to call it, circa like, I think, because the book came out in 2017. We all know what happened in 2017. More specifically, election wise, what happened in 2017. So there were a lot of tensions running around that time, and I think this book was trying to capitalize on that, and sort of how divided people were, and spin it in an interesting angle that was more horrific in nature. So the story kind of revolves around the coming of this supernatural entity who is later revealed to be, although I don't think they get the exact, like they don't label it exactly, but they heavily imply and pretty much confirm that this entity is the devil. And it basically spends all of the 12 issues kind of screwing with these detectives who are in this warehouse trapped with him, and are being fed illusions and everything, and it's all the while giving us flashbacks to moments in these detectives' past where they're sort of running through their own personal stuff, but a lot of that is in the backdrop of political division, and they're talking about like oh, the election is because the flashbacks take place about a year before the story is taking place in 2017. So they're talking about like, oh, the election is coming up, and so is never going to get elected. That'll never happen. And it's sort of painting the picture of like a very divided country, but trying to paint it in such a way that it's almost more horrific in nature. But the ultimate climax of the story is, because you're wondering all this time, like, the devil is kind of screwing with these people, but why? What's the point? Like it seems like such a weird time to do it, but given the backdrop of everything, you ultimately realize, no, it's the perfect time to do it, because what better time is there to come now than at a time when people are more divided than ever, and taking advantage of that division, could ultimately lead you to have hell on earth. I think the message is an interesting one, but it's one that, I don't know. It doesn't really offer anything, and that's where it kind of lost me. Like it's worth your time, and I recommend it as a read. But it's one that it feels like someone saying things are really screwed up, but I don't really have a solution for it. So there, and I didn't really know how to feel about that. It's not necessarily untrue. It's more just like that's not really a unique take. Like it's something that any nihilistic high school student could tell you, but. I would
Fair
recommend
enough.
it as a read. Yeah, I'd recommend it as a read just to kind of determine your thoughts for yourself, and ultimately where you land on how you feel about it. And the last one was kind of a shorter one, but one that I went through recently, called Sorrow from Rick Remender and Francesco Francavilla, which it's like a classic like 70s horror movie. These teens go to a town. That town is possessed by the entities of, I believe, dead Native Americans who have been kidnapping people, tourists that have come into their town, and they kidnap them, kill them, and possess their bodies. And our main characters are lured into this town because of shenanigans, and everything just kind of unfolds from there. But that's like classic retro horror, and I think it does it really well. It's not exceptional, but it's a lot of fun. So those are some classics that I figured I'd recommend. And then, like I said, everything that we've already talked about, Swamp Thing, Closet, read it all because it's good.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Definitely.
The saga of the Swamp Thing and the Swamp Thing. Rom V's latest run on the Swamp Thing, which is just now coming to a close or come to a close. This is going to sound weird to say, but it is so similar to Alan Moore's run while being completely different that you've got to check it out. It's so good. And it's a completely different Swamp Thing.
Definitely. I mean, it sounds like a good thing that I take your guys' recommendations to heart. Maybe not so much as Josh's, because he had me watch a terrible movie once.
Oh
Um,
god. Ah, that's tough.
but nonetheless, I think, yeah, I think we got some pretty good picks. I think we should start something in the Discord where we can post all of our suggestions and recommendations that people should read and or watch and or. Well, I guess that's all you're really gonna do with it. Maybe read, watch.
I
Yeah.
would absolutely love to do that. And can I just say, watching you go from a somewhat light room to a completely pitch black room feels perfectly in line with the horror topic, and I love it.
Yeah. So for those who are unaware, my studio is unfinished. So having all the nice little fixtures and furniture that I would like in here are currently not available. So I am taking full advantage of my natural light, and it's now looking like an old like a found footage movie, like those
I
during the
know.
pandemic.
You're just like in the void right now, and it's really creepy.
The creepy thing is that you can see we have like brass doorknobs on like our closet and
Yeah,
stuff.
no,
And
I
they
see
look,
that. I was like, what is that? They look like eyes.
yeah, they look like eyes. Oh, that is terrifying.
Uh,
Wahahahaha.
Well, I think that'll finish up today's episode. I think I had a
Ugh.
great time hearing all these recommendations and all these new things about comic books. That I always like learning about new things about comics because as someone who didn't really grow up with comics, that was more my uncle. It's always nice to hear like what's a good run, what's a bad run, who's the guy that's who's writing it, and who should you look out for, and who really sucks ass, and just don't touch them with somebody else's fucking fingers. So,
I mean, I've got plenty of those answers, but mine tend to be different from most other people.
right, exactly, because you have the most wonderful suggestions on the planet.
Yeah.
No, just
Hey, now, one movie that I suggested that he watch because of how bad it was, I just didn't
Yeah.
tell him that's why I suggested it, and he'll never let me live it down.
Man. Oh man, what was it?
American Carnage.
Yeah, that's what it was. It was.
Don't
It
worry.
was so.
Sorry.
It was so bad I couldn't remember the name.
Yo, it's getting really progressively darker, and it's starting to freak me out, and I'm in the room.
Yeah. Wait. Sorry, I didn't hear. What was the movie?
American Carnage.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, don't watch it. It's not good.
Okay. I will not because I've heard how bad it is at this point.
But thank you again for coming on the pod and talking.
My pleasure.
Being very passionate about the things that you love, and then that you have now, joined hands with us as we do our little seance and and spooky. Because
guess I have.
we are true fans of horror. We will watch good and bad. Clearly,
Ain't that the truth?
and we're in it for the love of horror, and I'm glad that you are now a part of that. And I hope
Yeah.
as we expressed, we would love to do another episode, maybe a couple months from now, as we can pick up more new horror.
Yes.
And we can do our trade offs and recommend what's good and tell stories about it.
I would love to.
Well, then it sounds like it's a plan. Maybe
Sounds like a plan to me.
maybe we plan it for Not a Robot Screams for October. Haha.
Oh, that would be
That-
perfect timing. That would be perfect. Oh
would be
man,
perfect.
we could do. I mean, I don't want to speak for you guys, but I remember thinking of doing this last year on the DC show, and I just didn't think it would fit. But a Halloween comics themed episode, not necessarily horror, but like the best like Halloween / horror themed comics, because there's a whole genre of that too.
There really
Yeah.
is, and I'd be down for that. That could be one of
Yeah.
the episodes we do.
You can just do a big
I'm all
crossover.
about Halloween. Is like Samhain is like my favorite holiday of all time. It's really important to me, so I'm all down for celebrating it as much as possible.
Definitely. Well, all right. Well,
Definitely.
Josh, do you want us to give us our eloquent sign off?
Our eloquent sign off. Well, I will try to be as eloquent as possible. Peace out. No, I'm just kidding. All right. Well, we've been rattling on and prattling on here for a long time. So Isaiah's asked me to say goodnight, and that is exactly what I'm going to do. Thank you so very much for listening into our Not a Robot Screens and Not a Robot Comics crossover event, one of many that will be on its way. If you'd like to help us keep this show going and any others, we would always appreciate a donation at buymeacoffee.com/NAR podcasts. You can visit us at notarobotpodcast.com. And, oh, yeah, I forgot to mention, buy me a coffee. You can go there, make a one-time donation. You can sign up for a recurring monthly $5 donation, get into our Discord, talk to us, end up on the show, give us ideas, just bullshit with us, argue with us, and tell us why we're wrong. But it's going to be a hard-fought battle, I'm telling you. In any case, there is only one way that we say goodbye around here, and that is be good to yourself, be good to each other, don't turn the lights out. And don't be a robot.
Ah!
Oh, God. No. No, he's gone.